The last hope. The sky above the alien planet was dark, filled with swirling clouds that matched the unease of its inhabitants. The planet was on the brink of destruction, and the once thriving cities were now nothing more than burning ruins. It had all started months ago, when an unknown enemy had attacked. First, it was just small skirmishes on the outskirts, but soon, the enemy had launched a full-scale invasion, overwhelming the planet's defenses with terrifying speed. The alien species, known for their intelligence and advanced technology, had always believed they were invincible. But now, they were on the verge of extinction. In the largest surviving city, the alien leaders gathered in a dark, underground command center. The lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of fear. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the equipment and the occasional beep of the communication devices. The alien commander, a tall, regal figure named Zoreth, stood at the head of the table, his face etched with worry. "We have no more weapons, no more ships," Zoreth said, his voice low. "Our cities are falling, and we are outnumbered. Our only hope is this." He turned towards a large communication screen. The device flickered for a moment before a holographic display appeared in front of them. The screen showed a distant star system, far outside the reach of their known allies. The galaxy was vast, and the alien species had never before thought of contacting others in times of crisis. But now, there was no choice. This was their last hope. "We send the message," Zoreth said, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and determination. "To the Deathworlders." The Deathworlders were a myth among the aliens, a race of humans who were said to be powerful beyond belief. The legends described them as fierce warriors, capable of surviving the most hostile environments in the universe. Many had heard the stories, but none believed them to be true. They were just tales told to children. But now, the aliens had no choice but to put their faith in these legends. The alien scientists worked quickly, patching together their broken communication systems. The image of the Deathworlder fleet slowly came into focus on the screen. Zoreth's hands trembled as he pressed a button, sending a message into the void of space. "This is Commander Zoreth of the Xarnal species." The message began. "We are under attack by an unknown enemy. We are on the verge of extinction. We need help. Please, Deathworlders, we need your strength. This is our last hope. Please respond." The message echoed into the silence of space, reaching the farthest corners of the universe. Zoreth and the other commanders stood, waiting. The minutes stretched into hours, each second feeling like an eternity. They all knew the message was a long shot. What if the Deathworlders were just a myth? What if they never received the message? What if help never came? But then, as the last traces of hope seemed to vanish, the communication screen blinked to life. A new message came through, faint but clear enough to be understood. "This is Fleet Command, Deathworlder forces. We received your distress call," a voice said, calm and steady. "Help is on the way." The room fell silent. Zoreth's eyes widened in disbelief. The Deathworlders had heard them. They were coming. The screen blinked again, and this time, a hologram of the Deathworlder fleet appeared before them. The sheer size of it was overwhelming. Ships larger than anything the aliens had ever seen stretched out across the display, their sleek, deadly forms visible even through the thick atmosphere of their planet. The Deathworlder fleet was real, and they were coming to help. "We'll arrive in 2 hours," the voice continued. "Prepare yourselves." Zoreth felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that help was on the way, but terror at what the Deathworlders' arrival might mean. Would they be able to trust these powerful strangers, or would their arrival lead to even greater dangers? No one knew, but at this moment, there was no turning back. The alien leaders began to scramble. They sent out commands to all the remaining troops, gathering what little they had left. The planet's defenses were mostly destroyed, but they would need to make a stand, no matter how small. The Deathworlders were their last hope, But could they truly save them? As the final preparations were made, Zorath stared out into the distance, his thoughts heavy. The enemy forces were closing in, and the Deathworlders, with their unknown strength, were all that stood between the aliens and total annihilation. Could the Deathworlders live up to their legendary reputation? Would they truly be able to save them from the brink of destruction? Zorath didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain. Time was running out, and they had to be ready. The fate of their entire species rested in the hands of these mysterious warriors from another world, the arrival of the Deathworlders. The tension was unbearable. Every passing second seemed to stretch longer than the one before, as the alien commanders rushed to prepare their planet for what could be its final battle. Zorath, the commander who had made the call for help, paced back and forth in the dimly lit command center. His thoughts were a mix of hope and doubt. Could the Deathworlders truly help them? Or was this all a desperate mistake? He stared at the screen, watching as the seconds ticked away. 2 hours. The Deathworlders had promised to arrive in 2 hours, but Zorath wondered what exactly that meant. How powerful were they? How many of them were there? The unknowns were endless, and the threat from the enemy forces was growing stronger with every moment. The enemy had surrounded the planet in a tightening grip, pushing forward with unrelenting force. The alien fighters, once a proud symbol of their power, were barely holding the line. Alien cities continued to fall, one by one, under the onslaught of the mysterious invaders. If the Deathworlders didn't arrive soon, there would be nothing left to save. Finally, the countdown reached 0. The massive fleet of the Deathworlders had entered the system, and their ships, so much larger and more imposing than anything the aliens had ever seen, came into view. The first few ships were already in orbit above the planet, and Zorath could see them clearly on the screen. Their sleek, sharp forms cut through the darkness of space, radiating power in a way that was impossible to ignore. The commander's heart raced. The Deathworlders had arrived, just as they had promised. But now came the moment of truth. Would these strange warriors really fight for them? Could they really turn the tide of battle? "Prepare the ground forces," Zorath ordered, his voice steady but with an underlying tremor. "Prepare to greet our new allies." The alien ground troops, once confident in their abilities, now moved with a sense of unease. They had never fought alongside another species, let alone one with the reputation of the Deathworlders. The aliens had heard stories about their brutal strength, their savage fighting skills, but these were just tales. Would the legends hold true when it mattered most? The first wave of Deathworlder soldiers began to land, their ships descending through the atmosphere in a flawless formation. Each ship touched down with such force that the ground shook beneath them. The Deathworlders disembarked, their armor glinting in the light of the alien sun, their faces hidden behind cold, expressionless helmets. They were tall, intimidating figures. Humans, yes, but unlike any humans the aliens had ever imagined. Zorath stood in the midst of his troops, watching with a mixture of awe and dread. These beings were not like any other. They were warriors, plain and simple, their movements efficient and precise. The way they moved, the way they carried themselves, it was like nothing the aliens had ever seen. Without a word, the Deathworlders began to fan out, forming battle lines with the alien forces. The sheer power of their presence sent a ripple of nervous energy through the alien ranks. Every one of them knew that this was their last chance. If these Deathworlders couldn't help them win, they would all perish. The first skirmishes began almost immediately. As the enemy forces closed in on the planet's surface, the Deathworlders showed their true power. They fought with a ferocity that the aliens had never experienced. The Deathworlders wielded weapons that made the aliens' advanced technology look like child's play. Their laser rifles cut through the enemy ranks like butter, and their hand-to-hand combat was brutal, leaving nothing but crushed bodies in their wake. Zorath watched in stunned silence as the Deathworlders moved like a storm across the battlefield. They fought with the kind of determination that the alien species had never seen before, never even dreamed of. Every shot they fired seemed to hit its mark, and every enemy that came close to them was swiftly dispatched. The Deathworlders didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't falter. They were unstoppable. The alien forces, seeing the Deathworlders in action, began to feel something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The once unbreakable enemy lines began to crack, and the aliens rallied behind their new allies. The Deathworlders had come, and they were fighting like legends, like warriors straight out of the most incredible stories the aliens had ever heard. But even as the Deathworlders gained ground, Zorath knew the battle was far from over. The enemy forces had not shown their full strength yet. The alien command center buzzed with urgent reports. Reinforcements were on their way, and the enemy's true strength was yet to be revealed. Zorath felt a chill run down his spine. The Deathworlders had proven their strength, but could they withstand the full force of the enemy? And even if they could, what price would they pay for victory? There was only one way to find out. Zorath took a deep breath, steadied his nerves, and turned back toward the battlefield. The fight was far from over, but now, for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a flicker of hope. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were delivering the one thing the aliens had longed for, a chance at survival. The clash of powers. The battlefield had turned into a chaotic storm. The Deathworlders fought with a strength and precision that left the alien forces in awe, but Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The initial wave of enemy fighters had been pushed back, but that didn't mean the war was won. The real battle, the one that could decide the fate of their world, was yet to come. He stood in the command center, watching as the Deathworlders moved like a well-oiled machine, cutting through the enemy ranks with frightening efficiency. Their war cries echoed across the battlefield, and Zorath marveled at their resilience. Their power was undeniable, yet something gnawed at him. "They're not done yet," Zorath muttered to himself, his eyes scanning the horizon. The alien commander had felt a strange shift in the air. He could sense the enemy forces regrouping, preparing for something bigger. He had seen their first wave, their shock troops, but now he feared they were holding back their true strength. He was right. The first wave had only been a distraction, a tactic to lure the Deathworlders into a false sense of security. Across the battlefield, the ground shook as the enemy's true forces began to emerge from their hidden strongholds. Their ships, massive and imposing, descended from the sky like dark omens. This wasn't just another assault. This was their final strike, a blow meant to end everything in one fell swoop. Zorath's heart sank as he watched the alien command center's holographic display. The enemy forces had grown in number, their ships descending with such overwhelming power that it seemed like the very ground beneath them would break apart. They had been hiding their true strength, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. "Commander, we're receiving an urgent message," one of the officers called out, interrupting Zorath's thoughts. The officer's voice trembled with fear, a rare crack in his normally steady demeanor. Zorath turned to the officer. "What is it?" "The enemy has activated a new weapon," the officer said, his voice shaking. "It's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's massive, and it's coming toward us." Zorath's eyes narrowed. He knew what that meant. The enemy had been holding back, waiting for the right moment to unleash their most devastating weapon. And now, that moment had arrived. He turned back to the battlefield, his mind racing. The Deathworlders had proven themselves capable warriors, but this new enemy force was unlike anything they had encountered before. Could they really stand up to this new threat? He didn't have time to dwell on it. The Deathworlders had already begun preparing for the next wave. They were relentless. Zorath watched as the human warriors, despite the overwhelming odds, formed their ranks and prepared for battle. The ground vibrated with the thrum of their weapons, and their battle cries rose higher than before. But even with the Deathworlders' power, Zorath couldn't help but wonder how long they could hold out against an enemy that had yet to show its full strength. Would the Deathworlders' ferocity be enough, Or would they be overwhelmed by the sheer force of this new threat? As the enemy forces moved into position, Zoreth's mind was in turmoil. He had never felt so helpless. The fate of the planet, the lives of his people, now rested in the hands of these alien warriors who were, despite their impressive strength, still outsiders. Zoreth took a deep breath and turned toward the command center. It was time to act. The Deathworlders had proven their strength, but the real test had just begun. The battle intensifies. The air was thick with tension as the enemy's new weapon made its presence known. The ground rumbled beneath the feet of Zoreth and the Deathworlders, signaling the approach of something far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. The enemy had shown their hand, and it was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Zoreth clenched his fists. He had seen powerful weapons before, but this was something else. He watched through the command center's windows as the massive alien vessel approached, its surface gleaming under the eerie glow of distant stars. Its sheer size was enough to send a chill down his spine. "Commander, it's closing in," one of the officers shouted, his voice barely audible over the rising hum of energy shields. Zoreth's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary assault. The weapon was unlike anything the Deathworlders had encountered. He had hoped that their strength, their rage, and their relentless will to fight would be enough to overcome the enemy. But as the massive ship hovered over the battlefield, casting an ominous shadow over the land, doubt crept into his mind. The Deathworlders, however, did not falter. They had faced impossible odds before, and this was no different. They had been bred for war, each one of them a relentless force of nature. Their weapons were deadly, and their warriors were stronger than anything the aliens could imagine. They were ready. "Prepare for impact," Zoreth shouted, rallying his forces. His voice cut through the chaos, urging the Deathworlders to stand firm. The ground trembled as the enemy ship released a barrage of energy blasts. The Deathworlders were quick to react, their energy shields flickering to life just in time to absorb the deadly blasts. But the force of the attack sent shockwaves through their ranks, knocking some of them off their feet. Zoreth's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the scene unfold. He had never seen anything like this. The Deathworlders were strong, yes, but even they seemed to be struggling under the weight of this new enemy. "Commander, we need to retreat," one of the officers urged. "We can't hold out much longer." But Zoreth refused to give in. Retreat was not an option. They had come this far, and he would not let his people fall now. The Deathworlders had proven their strength, their ferocity, and their willingness to fight, and he knew they wouldn't back down. "We hold the line," Zoreth commanded. "The Deathworlders will not be defeated." With a roar, the Deathworlders charged forward, their weapons blazing as they fired at the descending enemy ship. The blasts hit their mark, but the ship's armor was nearly impenetrable. It was as if the enemy knew exactly how to counter the Deathworlders' every move. Yet, the Deathworlders did not relent. They adapted, they fought back with even more intensity, their weapons changing tactics as they tried to find a weak spot in the enemy's defenses. The battle raged on, an unrelenting clash of strength, fury, and desperation. Zoreth watched as one of the Deathworlder warriors, a towering figure named Rax, led a group of fighters directly under the enemy ship. Rax was the kind of warrior who thrived in chaos, and Zoreth trusted him to find a way through the storm. "Rax, take that ship down," Zoreth ordered, his voice firm. Rax, a massive human warrior with arms as thick as tree trunks, gave a savage grin. "It's time to end this," he growled, his voice full of bloodlust. The Deathworlders fought with everything they had. They launched themselves at the enemy ship, using their advanced weaponry and brute strength to tear into the ship's defenses. Explosions rocked the battlefield as they made progress, but the enemy was not going to go down without a fight. With every blow struck against their vessel, the enemy retaliated with even more firepower, forcing the Deathworlders to adapt on the fly. But Zoreth knew one thing for sure: the Deathworlders would not back down. They would fight to the end, no matter the cost. They had faced insurmountable odds before, and they had always come out victorious. The tension was unbearable as the battle reached its peak. Zorath could hear the screams of his warriors, the sound of weapons clashing, and the roar of the enemy's weapons firing at will. The ground was torn apart, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burning energy. It was a fight for survival, and the Deathworlders were giving everything they had. They had proven their strength. Now, it was time to see if their fury could be enough to turn the tide of this war. The turning point. The ground shook violently beneath Zorath's feet as the enemy ship's weapons continued to rain destruction down on the battlefield. The air was thick with smoke, the once vibrant sky now darkened by the explosions and debris. The Deathworlders were in the thick of it, their ferocity unmatched. But the enemy's new weapon was a force to be reckoned with. The battle was growing more intense by the minute, and it seemed like the tide was turning against them. Zorath's eyes darted across the battlefield, searching for any sign of weakness, any opportunity to strike. The enemy ship loomed above them, its shields glowing brightly, making it nearly impervious to their weapons. Their enemy had anticipated every move, countering with precision and force. "Commander, we can't keep this up," an officer shouted through the chaos. "We're being overwhelmed. We need to regroup." Zorath's grip on his weapon tightened. Regrouping wasn't an option. The Deathworlders had come too far to retreat now. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The lives of his people depended on this battle, and they couldn't afford to lose. Just as Zorath began to think all hope was lost, a new sound pierced the air, an unfamiliar, rumbling roar that drowned out all other noise. It was different from the distant explosions. This sound was closer, and it carried with it an undeniable power. Zorath's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the source of the sound. Through the thick smoke, a new force emerged from the horizon. It was not a ship. It was an army, a massive fleet of Deathworlder ships, each one bristling with weapons, each one a deadly force of nature in its own right. "Reinforcements," Zorath shouted, a surge of hope rushing through him. The fleet, led by the legendary Deathworlder Admiral Vale, thundered onto the battlefield like a storm, their weapons blazing. The ground quaked as the Deathworlder ships descended, their massive cannons firing with precision. The enemy's shield flickered under the force of the assault, and for the first time in what felt like hours, the Deathworlders began to make headway. The tide of the battle began to shift. Zorath's eyes widened as Val's flagship, a colossal vessel known as the Indomitable Fury, took the lead, its massive guns tearing through the enemy ship's shields like paper. The enemy retaliated with all their might, but the reinforcements were overwhelming. The battle raged on, but now the Deathworlders were on the offensive. Their relentless assault, their fury unleashed, began to tear apart the enemy's defenses. The Deathworlder warriors pushed forward with renewed vigor, their weapons cutting through alien forces like a hot knife through butter. Zorath's pulse quickened. He could feel the turning point had arrived. The Deathworlders were no longer fighting to hold on. They were fighting to win. As the reinforcements tore into the heart of the enemy ship, Zorath watched in awe as Val's flagship unleashed a devastating blow that shattered the enemy's shield. The massive explosion sent shockwaves through the battlefield, lighting up the darkened skies. "Now," Zorath shouted as the Deathworlders surged forward, charging toward the weakened enemy ship. The final blow was within reach. The Deathworlders poured their energy into one last, powerful assault, every warrior fighting with the determination of those who had nothing left to lose. Zorath could see the exhaustion on their faces, but there was no fear. Only fire, rage, and an unyielding will to win. The enemy, battered and broken, could no longer hold their ground. Their ship began to falter, its energy systems failing as the Deathworlders pressed in from all sides. It was in that moment that Zorath knew. The battle was almost over. The Deathworlders had proven their strength, their fury, and their unbreakable will. The enemy had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. With one final, resounding explosion, the enemy ship exploded in a blaze of fire and debris, signaling the end of the battle. The Deathworlders stood victorious, their enemies shattered before them. Zorath's chest heaved with heavy breaths as he surveyed the battlefield. It was over. The Deathworlders had triumphed, and the galaxy would never forget the strength, power, and fury they had unleashed. But Zorath knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had witnessed their power, and now they would know their name. Deathworlders. The final stand. A new era begins. The galaxy was still. The stars glimmered as they always had, distant and indifferent. But for the Deathworlders, everything had changed. Their final battle had shattered the forces that had threatened the peace of the cosmos. The wreckage of the enemy station now drifted in the dark expanse of space, a grave reminder of the power that had been unleashed. But despite the victory, Zorath felt the weight of their actions pressing on him. Standing on the command bridge of the flagship, his gaze fixed on the wreckage, he could feel the victory reverberating through every corner of space. The galaxy would remember this moment. The Deathworlders had not only defeated their enemies, they had sent a message. "We've won." Admiral Val's voice echoed behind him, her words firm but tinged with the solemnity of their accomplishment. Zorath turned toward her, his mind racing. "We've won, yes, but the galaxy is changing. The old powers may crumble, but something new will rise in its place." Val stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "What will we become then? What will we show the galaxy about who we truly are?" Zorath's thoughts were heavy. The Deathworlders had always been feared. Their power, their fury, and their resolve had made them the galaxy's most formidable force. But now, they had proven that they could bring justice, that they could be the answer to the universe's darkest moments. It wasn't just about strength, it was about leadership, about guiding the galaxy into a new age. "We are the protectors now," Zorath said, his voice steady. "We have proven that we can fight. But now we must show that we can build. The universe needs a new order, one of strength, but also one of peace." Val nodded, her eyes sharp. "And we will lead it." Zorath's eyes darkened. "We will. But we won't do it alone. We've seen the power of unity in this war. If we can bring the galaxy together, if we can guide them to understand the power of cooperation, then this victory will be more than just a battle won. It will be the beginning of something greater." As the fleet made its way back to the Deathworlder homeworld, there was no fanfare. There were no celebrations. The fleet had returned as warriors, as conquerors, but it was clear that this victory marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Deathworlders had risen, but now they would forge the future. The galaxy would have to change. The Deathworlders, once viewed with fear, would now become the stewards of the new age. The remnants of the old order would fade into history, and a new power would rise from the ashes. But there was no doubt in Zorath's mind. The Deathworlders would be at the helm, leading the galaxy forward with the same strength that had carried them through the war. As Zorath stood at the helm of his flagship, staring out at the infinite expanse of space, he knew that their journey had only just begun. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but the Deathworlders had proven that they were ready for anything. They had faced the worst the universe could throw at them, and they had emerged victorious. And now, as the Deathworlders looked to the stars, they knew that their strength, their power, and their unity would be the foundation upon which the galaxy would be rebuilt. The universe had witnessed their fury, and it had been forever changed. There would be no turning back. With that knowledge, Zorath finally allowed himself a breath. The battle had been won. The future was theirs to shape. The Deathworlders had not just saved the galaxy, they had set the stage for a new era. And in this new world, the galaxy would know true strength, true power, and true unity. A future forged in fire, led by the warriors who had taken charge when the universe needed them the most.